We are here together today for Open Educational Resources, OER, in the sciences. My name is Moriana Garcia. I'm a STEM and Scholarly Communications Librarian at the University of Rochester. My colleague, Kim Hoffman, is with me here today. She was the main editor of the book, Open Pedagogy Approaches, Faculty Library and Student Collaborations. I was on the editorial board. And this event today is part of the author series. So we will have the authors of 2 chapters from the book presenting about their experience with OER and library faculty collaborations. The first presentation is going to be mathematics courses and the Ohio Open Ed collaborative course content building for statewide use. And we will have Daniel Dotson, head of the Geology Library at the Ohio State University, and Anna Davis, associate professor and department head of mathematics at Ohio Dominican University, presenting on that topic. Next, we will have library support for Scaffolding OER-Enabled Pedagogy in a general education science course, presented by Lindsey Gum, who is a scholarly communications librarian and assistant professor at Roger Williams University Library, and Heather Miceli, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, instructor of general education science at Roger Williams University as well. Without further ado, I will ask our first group, Daniel and Anna, to share their screen and start. I'm going to stop sharing, and whenever they want, they can start their presentation.
Okay, so you already saw the title of the chapter, so I'm not going to reread that. I'm Daniel Dotson. I'm at the University Libraries at Ohio State, and mathematics and statistics are 2 of the subject areas I work with, which is how I got into this. And I'll let Anna introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Anna Davis. I have been at Ohio Dominican for about 16 years teaching mathematics courses, and it was a real pleasure to work with Danny on this project and the book chapter.
Okay, and so we're going to go through, Anna's going to do the second half of this presentation. It's pretty short. So first of all, our roles. So my role in this was a librarian, even though I do have a math background. My focus was really on the information resources. And so what I did was I found items that could be potential use for the content teams. And there were multiple teams that I worked with for multiple courses. And so I would find both primary content, which would be textbook-like things. I'm putting it like that because some items are actually online courses in a totally different format, but also stuff for supplementary content, so videos, reading sometimes, and other things. And I also did some copyright and fair use triage, although we did have, for this entire Ohio Open Ed project, we had a copyright person that I could refer to if I had doubts about something. And I was also the lead author of the book chapter. Anna, on the other hand, was the content expert and team lead for some multiple courses. And she was also one of the original people to put in a grant. So she was on the grant steering committee, and also a project manager, which is probably, I would say, the hardest job of all the jobs that people had, was to actually manage the projects in many ways for one of the courses. So part of what we ended up doing is a little bit of background is the state received grants from different angles, and they basically said, all of you are doing something similar, work together. And so the original grant had a mix of community colleges and universities and some of the private institutions. And so all those things got pulled together. And so what ended up happening with the math courses was they decided we're going to do 2 higher level math courses, and we're going to do some lower level math courses. So the commonly offered ones you see at the bottom: calculus, linear algebra, college algebra, and pre-calc. And the higher level was the ordinary differential equations and the abstract algebra. So the big focus of this was on higher enrollment, but because of the way the grant came in, we did some higher level math courses as well. And so when they were thinking about what courses would be involved, the steering committee vetted and made decisions. And I would think that at least 3 of these courses, almost everybody here would look at and say, yeah, at my school, that's a pretty big deal. And linear algebra is fairly heavily used in multiple areas of the sciences. So that's part of the reason it got in with the commonly offered and higher enrollment. And so that's how we got to the courses that we chose. This entire project isn't math focused. So there were courses from all sorts of other subject areas, but our chapter was on the math stuff because we're math, we were the math groups. So, so the main content option, I started with library ebooks because I was most familiar with those, but a lot of OERs are available, especially for the lower level courses. And the library ebooks, we stuck to what's available through our OhioLink system rather than what's available just through a specific school. So if Ohio State had an ebook and Ohio Dominican did not, there was no point in using that ebook. But we have a lot of stuff available through the statewide consortium OhioLink. So all those books and all those OERs and also team created content was potentially available. And we're going to show you, we did that in some cases on steroids, I would say, in other areas. So I would say OER was really a big focus because there was a lot of desirability to be able to modularize content or make some adaptation and use it in multiple ways, which you really can't do with the copyrighted ebooks. So OER was really the meat of most of the courses. And in terms of what was required, we have a system in Ohio called TAGs, Transfer Assurance Guidelines, that say that if you take a Calculus 1 course at Ohio State and Calculus 1 at Ohio Dominican, this is what should be in both of those courses in order to allow transfers between institutions within Ohio. So those were used to say, hey, we want to make sure all these topics are covered in these classes, which didn't mean that you couldn't include other things, but those were like the essentials. And what content we found that didn't align to the tag, so if something was missing in a particular OER that was chosen, alternate content was pulled in. And also desired was ancillary content. And we're going to get to that later, but it was deemed extremely important that the ancillary content, especially the add-ons that you think about a lot of publishers having, are the types of things that you want to be able to have. But also there were activities, assignments, videos, readings, those types of things. And in putting this together, because this is math, LaTeX was deemed to be very essential, so that way it's properly displayed on screens and work with that. Overleaf is a major tool that people could use to work with the LaTeX and make sure things perform well and look correctly. There is a homegrown system at Ohio State called Chimera that is used for some of the courses, and some of it like for a full course, some of it for part of a course or some assignments that allows a lot of interactivity. So that was a platform which calculus in particular, which is what Chimera really started out working with, was available for. But it was used in some of the other courses. And Desmos was used to create some activities, and we used other things around there. But the essential part of that bit is that the LaTeX enabled through any of these systems allow things to display right, look right, interact right. So in terms of the ancillary content, the idea was, yeah, the main content's great, but there was a lot of stuff that people wanted to use for instructional purposes, such as text, videos, etc. For videos, for example, Khan Academy was quite popular, but there were some other potential opportunities there. We didn't have any platform that was really statewide that we could really rely on, except for one that was more of a physics demonstration type resource, but we had other activities in mind. So lab activities and interactive content, the desire was this was going to be not just people reading, reading, reading. It was, they wanted people to do some activities, they wanted some interactive content, so it was important that it not be like flat, just like reading a print book and nothing else. And also some graded options, including some worksheets and problems. So I'm going to let Anna go from here and talk more in depth about this ancillary content. And I'll go ahead and navigate the slides for you.
All right, thank you, Danny. All right, so one of the main barriers to adoption, as we found, is lack of additional materials. It is often possible to find a really cheap textbook or a free textbook, but then when it comes down to it, things like test banks, worksheets, PowerPoint presentations are things that instructors often looking for and lack in the free domain. And so one of our big goals was to not just find the textbook, but to find those additional flexible resources so that somebody can just come in and teach the whole course out of the OER materials and not just have one textbook and have to create everything else from scratch. So instructional materials that we ended up adding different things for different courses, but altogether videos for instruction, of course, textbooks and readings, activities such as labs and worksheets, and of course, assessments, different questions that were built into our materials or in different platforms. So when it came to designing these courses, one thing that we had to keep in mind is that we're not designing the course for somebody else. This is not our day to come up with our favorite linear algebra course. What we really had to do is make the materials available to other people so that they can create their favorite linear algebra course. And so a lot of our materials ended up being a compilation of different approaches, different types of materials. So for example, for the linear algebra course, we found a number of textbooks that are freely available, and we made those links available to through our compilation. But we also found that we personally, and we know other people, are looking for things that are more interactive than a textbook. And this is where the Ohio State platform called Chimera that Danny mentioned a few minutes ago came in really, really handy. And there is nothing like Chimera. I absolutely love Chimera. What it allows you to do is use LaTeX to write your own content, but then you can also build in self-graded exercises into this content. And it's a really robust platform because it allows for numeric input, but it also allows for verbal input and symbolic input. And so there is a great variety of exercises that you can do. You can also use things like GeoGebra and Desmos and import them directly into Chimera, embed them into the cell-graded system as activities or labs. So it's very, very flexible and robust. And so we ended up doing a combination of things. So maybe there is an existing textbook and we would add worksheets or a set of modules that are a little bit more interactive to make it into a complete package. Two of our big goals were, of course, to match what we created to the set of standards, those tags, the Ohio common tags for all of the courses that exist for actually most courses, not all of them. And so we had to make sure that we cover all the material that's supposed to be covered. And our other objective is to, again, not to necessarily design a coherent course that we would teach, but make it modular enough that people can easily customize what they see and bring one element in at a time and kind of assemble what they would like to see of their course. Once all of those materials were assembled, somehow we had to put them together and make sense of them and make sure that they make sense to other people. So we started the whole process started by recruiting faculty from multiple institutions. We tried to get a lot of different representation from different colleges. So on most of my teams, we had a community college instructor, faculty member. We had someone from a large institution. We had somebody from maybe a private or an independent college. And so all types of institutions were well represented. our materials, once we pull them all together, to make sense of them and to help other people make sense of them, we put something together called the adoption guide. And that's where we outlined the resources, gave different links, maybe made some suggestions for how these things can be put together in the classroom, and gave the overall structure for the project. So those adoption guides were an important part of the process. And then all of the materials went through a peer review process. And the way our peer review process was structured was a little different from your blind peer review that an academic journal might have. Our goal was to really create partnerships and relationships between people and different faculty from different institutions, so that our peer reviewers were really part of the process. They weren't just thumbs up or thumbs down, and nobody knows who they are kind of individuals. They really were a part of the process. They gave us feedback throughout the process, and we would incorporate their feedback and pass it back to the reviewers and have that conversation going. So I think it was a much more productive, formative process than either thumbs up or thumbs down at the end. All of these projects were finalized and posted on Ohio Link OER Commons, and all of the projects for all of the disciplines are right there. And what I'm going to do is I just shared a link to Ohio OER Commons. That's where you will find all of the projects for the Ohio Open Ed Collaborative. This is how it all came together. We had all of those different resources that were matched to the learning objectives for the state of Ohio. We made sure that our ancillary content went in nicely, fitted in with all the other resources. And of course, all of this was described in the quick start or the adoption guide to make it more, help make it more sense to anybody looking at it. And it's all posted on OER Commons. And I just shared a link to that. Now, one of the things that was really important to the steering committee and to the grant in general is, what do faculty who participated in the project actually think about their involvement in the project, and how happy are they with the final product? We had a team of evaluators from the Ohio State University do an evaluation that involved a lot of really extensive interviews with the faculty members who participated in the grant process. And this is a summary of what they found. Participants reported being proud of the package that they created, even if there was initial confusion about what they were expected to do. And that was one of the main themes, is that people participating in this process really had to have a lot of tolerance for ambiguity and not knowing exactly what the final product might be, but just being part of this creative process. And I think that's, when it comes to open educational resources, that's kind of the mindset that we discovered was really helpful, that we sort of knew what we wanted, but we were very open-minded about how we were going to go about achieving that goal. Most participants intended to adopt some of the materials, but there were often barriers that prevented this from happening as quickly as hoped. Some of these barriers had to do with departmental policies on how textbooks are adopted, because those decisions are made maybe on an annual or maybe every other year basis, and the whole department has to vote, and depending on the size of your department, things may or may not go exactly how you wanted them to go. So that was a part of it. The other part was educating adjunct faculty on how to use the materials and how to incorporate them into their teaching. The timing of content creation did not always align with course planning. So again, departmental planning need to redesign elements of a course due to a change in course materials. Again, that's departmental planning in a lot of cases. We had some technological learning curve issues because of so much technology that's being brought together by this process. As Danny mentioned, we had Desmos, LaTeX, GeoGebra, Chimera, and they all have to play nicely together. So it does take a little bit of getting used to, and that's can be a little bit of a barrier. And one thing we found is that depending on the learning management system that your campus uses, some things play nicely with other things and some things may not play quite as nicely. So there is a little bit of that needs to happen. And so each instructor at an individual institution has to put in a little bit of work into making sure that all of the technological pieces fit together. So I would be happy to answer any very specific questions on Chimera by email. I'll put my email out there into the chat box. But right now we'll take any kind of questions you might have.
We have one question in chat about where did you get the inspiration to conduct the peer review in such a way? I love it, and it seems like it's going into UX territory, experimental territory.
Yeah, actually, this was a decision made by the steering committee for the grant, the Ohio Open Ed Collaborative, and I think we all had the philosophy that this is a very collaborative effort. This is not a way for somebody to evaluate somebody else. This is not going up for tenure or getting your publications. This is all about let's get together and make the best product possible. And I think in the spirit of that is how we came up with this process that let's all work together because we all have the best of our students' interests in mind, and that's the best way to get there. So we didn't even have all that much discussion about it. It was kind of a given that we're just going to get together and work on it as one big team instead of creators versus reviewers.
And I think some of the Open Textbook Library from Minnesota, having peer reviews on the site that kind of gives some credence to the quality of the materials was an example of a way to show that, hey, people have evaluated this content and have found that it's a valuable resource as well. And the important thing is these were people that have taught these courses. So it's not just some random person going in and doing peer review. These are people that were experienced with teaching the courses, and they gave sometimes extensive feedback, I would say.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. If you want to unmute yourself and ask, that's perfectly fine. I have one question. Then it's how much do you think the fact that you have Ohio Link in Ohio with this big consortial library system that serves more educational institutions actually facilitated this process?
Oh, from a faculty perspective and from somebody who was on the steering committee, I think that was a tremendous part of this grant. It really brought everything together. It gave us a platform, but it also gave us the people to work with. I personally did not realize how much a librarian can help a faculty member in looking for those resources. And that was one comment that I consistently heard from my faculty colleagues, that, oh, I didn't realize you can find that in the library. Oh, I didn't know who I could talk to, but now I do. And so having that a really common hub for the entire state, again, not only gave us a platform, but it gave us librarian colleagues. And that was not necessarily something that my faculty colleagues were really aware of before.
And I would also say, even though we never adopted a OhioLink provided book, the fact that we could have done so, or we could have, and some of the other courses outside of math may have done that, for example, but there is a common base of resources that were from journal articles and ebooks that anybody within the institutions within the state could have access to. Whereas if we were in another state that did not have as good as a consortium, it would have been really much more difficult because school A may not have access to this journal, so no, we can't do that reading, or this school doesn't have access to this journal, so we can't do that reading. We have all this stuff from all these different publishers that are in common. I mean, there is a lot of unique stuff out there to other institutions, but we have a huge common set of resources, and the fact that we could have pulled many different types of content available would be there. And it was also some of the infrastructure, such as pulling the Ohio like OER Commons instance through a HyperLink allowed us to have a cooperative place to do this, whereas otherwise one institution may have had to take on that role.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation and answering the questions. We might have time at the end for other questions. If you have them in the meantime, please add them to the chat. So now I will invite our authors, Heather and Lindsey, to share their presentation. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Miceli, and I meant to correct Mariana at the beginning, but at the moment that she asked if that was correct, I decided to like choke and didn't want to cough on everybody. I'm here with my colleague, Lindsey Gum, and we're going to be talking about library support for scaffolding in OER-enabled pedagogy in a general education science class. And so just to introduce myself, I'm an adjunct faculty member. I've been teaching general education courses for 12 years at a few different institutions. This work has been done at Roger Williams University, but I'm also an adjunct faculty member at Johnson & Wales University in Rhode Island as well. I teach online for them. And I am an OER faculty fellow, a Roger Williams OER faculty fellow for a few years where most of this project was done. And I was an Open Education Group OER Research Fellow for this past year. And I'm going to let Lindsey introduce herself.
Thanks, Heather. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, wherever you are. My name is Lindsey Gum. She, her are my pronouns. I am the Scholarly Communications Librarian at Roger Williams University, which is in Rhode Island. I also serve as the Fellow for Open Education with the New England Board of Higher Ed. Like Heather, I was also really fortunate to be an Open Education Group OER Research Fellow this past year. And I also co-chair our state's Open Textbook Initiative Steering Committee.
So we're going to shift gears a little bit. So Anna and Daniel were really gracious to tell us about their statewide initiative, but we're actually going to talk about a course initiative. In my course, I teach a general education science course. It's called Core 101 at Roger Williams. It's one of 5 interdisciplinary courses that all students have to take at our institution. The only exception to that is the science majors. They don't actually have to take our Core 101 scientific investigations course. So my course is full of non-STEM majors, and I have a lot of students that are very, very hesitant to take the course. And a lot of them often put it off until their last semesters, or even if they do take it as a sophomore, or even sometimes a freshman, they haven't taken science likely in high school for a couple of years, or they just have really bad experiences with science. I also have students that took like 5 AP science courses in high school. So I kind of have this huge spectrum of students that I have to deal with and try to make the course as relevant to all of them as possible. At the same time, Core 101 is the last formal science education my students will have. So it's really important to me that this be a class where they come to appreciate science as something that is part of their lives, but also that they do have a voice in science. And so for years, I've been teaching this course. This is my 7th year teaching at Roger Williams. These are a few of the projects from some of my first semesters. As you can see, we've got topics of antibiotic resistance, designer babies, vaccines, nuclear power, space exploration. I've always opened up my class to projects that allow the students to investigate things that they think are relevant and interesting to them. And so for a few years, I had them create these posters and we had these great conversations, and it was amazing until I walked out of the classroom and all of them were in the trash. And that was really disheartening to see all of that work and time just literally thrown away. So I became a Roger Williams OER faculty fellow, and started working with Lindsey. And as part of the first year of that, that I was a fellow, Lindsey invited Rajiv Jhangiani to come speak to us at Roger Williams. And if you know Rajiv Jhangiani, he will sell you OER in 3 seconds. And he did. And he talked about this book, Environmental Science Bites. And it's a textbook that's written by non-majors for non-majors. And I was like, well, what if we expanded that out of environmental science? What would a textbook written for non-majors by non-majors actually look like? And it turns out it doesn't look like a textbook. It's a series of websites. So for the past 5 semesters, my students have been working on creating and modifying and editing websites that their previous students in my class had created. And so this is a screenshot of the space exploration page. You can see this is the colonization on Mars. I picked it because it has the coolest cover photo there. But you can see on the side, there's a whole bunch of different topics: exoplanets, the colonization on Mars, danger, controversy of space exploration. This is a little bit older. If you actually go to the website today, it has a lot of information about SpaceX and privatizing space exploration and space debris. And basically, we have 9 websites. These are completely student design websites, and the topics have been chosen by the students. They're all topics that I cover in the course because it is a general education course. We actually don't have any content objectives, so we're allowed to teach pretty much whatever we want. So I try to teach topics that they're going to encounter in their lives. And so some of the topics that we have: DNA, climate change, space exploration, artificial intelligence, GMOs, evolution, nutrition, vaccines, and human population. Some of our websites have been edited by 6 groups of students all the way through for the past, at least once for the past few semesters. Sometimes I have 2 groups working at once. Others have been only just created, like human population was a brand new website last semester. I had a group of students that were really interested in looking into human population and its impacts on the earth, and they jumped right in and started a brand new website. So throughout the semester, what happens is students choose topics they're interested in. Usually I do this with a Google form with the websites that are already existing, but students can certainly come to me and talk about websites that we don't have already. Once they're assigned to groups, they complete a website review to assess the state of the website. So these websites are literally being inherited by the students each new semester. So this coming semester, my students will get the websites as they currently exist on the internet. They are responsible for taking a look at the website, reviewing it to see what the content is, where there needs to be new images, some editing, that kind of thing. And they design a development plan. And this is the basis of their assessment. Because every group has a different goal in mind, I can't have a rubric for all of them. I can't have, it can't be standardized. So they design a development plan, and we use that on the last day of class and say, did you achieve your goals from the development plan? And go from there. They write rough drafts using Google Docs, and we do this because it's easier for me to go in and see how they're doing as a group. I can also keep track of who's added what. I've had only 1 or 2 instances of group members not really pulling their weight, and that's one of the ways that I've been able to kind of keep track of that. But it also is really easy to do peer review, because then I just add the peer reviewers from the class to the new draft, and they get commenting privileges so they can review the rough drafts. Then we provide copyright and Creative Commons workshops to help them with intellectual property rights, which is really the basis of our chapter in the book. And Lindsey's going to talk about it in just 1 second. And because in our first go round of this project, we actually realized that students have no like very basic knowledge of copyright and Creative Commons. So to create websites that are publicly available and openly available for other people to use them, we realized that we needed to give them a little bit of scaffolding to help them with that. And then once they're rough drafts and they kind of have like this basic idea of intellectual property rights, we let them loose using Google Sites. They create, they add their content, they add their media, they can add YouTube videos and images and links to websites. And they are responsible for the websites themselves. And I think my next page is for Lindsey. So if Lindsey wants to talk about our scaffolding.
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, so as Heather mentioned, we quickly realized after our first semester of working with students on this project, which was years ago at this point, we really lacked in getting our students prepared to participate in a lot of these activities. And so we found, we would need to do a lot of scaffolding to help them along the way. And that really is to ensure that we are helping them participate in this project, both ethically and legally, educating them on copyright, fair use, open licensing, authors' rights. And you can see that I've kind of organized the way that I've come to think about preparing our students into 3 buckets of helping them be prepared to be critical consumers, informed creators, and calculated contributors. So if we start with this idea of critical consumers, I'm really looking at working with these students through an information literacy lens. I am a librarian, and so I think about that a lot. And often when I meet with students in my day-to-day role as a librarian, I see them one time, right? This is what we call one-shot instruction with librarians. We see students, faculty bring them in, working on some kind of project, and they leave. The benefit of working with Heather, collaborating with her and her students is, I get to establish this relationship with these students to actually start to build meaningful information literacy skills, which I can kind of scaffold a little bit more thoughtfully. And so Heather mentioned that one of the first things the students do when they come and are introduced to this project is, they have inherited a website which students have created in semesters past, and they're kind of adopting it, right? It's theirs, they'll be working on it. And so one of the first things they do is they review their inherited websites. And I like to help them do that through an information literacy lens. So they read through the content, they identify where new research might be needed, maybe where citations need to be improved, or maybe where citations were lacking completely, where copyrighted images may have been used without either A, permission from the copyright holder, or B, a fair use assessment. And so as consumers, our students have the responsibility to ensure that they are using others' intellectual property responsibly. So that covers that, the citation aspect, citing literature properly to continue that scholarly conversation, but also when we're introducing media, using content legally. So what are the licensing restrictions on content? Can we make a fair use assessment? And then if we move on to this idea of helping our students be informed creators, because now they've inherited a website and now they will be creating a derivative really of this content, if you will. So I like to focus on helping Heather's students understand their rights as authors. So, we start with reviewing the websites and helping them understand how to use others' intellectual property responsibly. But then I like to shift it to help them understand that they also have rights as authors, right? They are essentially now authors of content that will be used by other students and potentially beyond the classroom walls. So helping them understand that their intellectual property is theirs, and what does that mean, right? So we do, like Heather mentioned, we do a workshop on copyright and fair use and open licensing, but I always start off with this activity where the students, I ask them to draw their favorite animal, and then they pass it around to a neighbor, and they also get a Creative Commons license, and they're asked, well, what if you found this image on the internet, like this was a Google search, this image appeared in front of you, what could you do with it? Would you have to ask permission? Does it have a CC BY license? And then I ask them to create an attribution statement. So try to help the students learn about not only using others' intellectual property, but the value of their own. And so along with that comes this idea of agency, right? That they and only they have the right to choose what they do with their intellectual property. Do they want to, do they feel comfortable applying an open license to their work? Would they like to use a pseudonym and not their real name? And Heather always assigns a really good reading to the students on this concept, so they kind of have an idea. So internet trolling and bullying and what that means, especially because they are creating websites on potentially controversial topics that will be searchable by the public. If their name is associated with that, what are the risks to that? You could potentially get harassed by someone on the internet. So just kind of helping them understand what it means to be an author, right? What rights they have, what things they need to be aware of, because students, they don't know this stuff, right? They might get really excited about participating in this, but they don't think the next step ahead of okay, what might the repercussions be? But also what might the rewards be? Why would they want to be contributing to a project like this? And then this concept of being calculated contributors. So sometimes this is the first time that students are put in the driver's seat, right? Of, being able to be the complete authority on a topic, and they can often be very uncomfortable with that. They're like, wait, what do you mean I'm going to be creating this website for other students to read and learn from? It can be a little intimidating, but it's really important to kind of empower them in that way. So along with that comes, helping them be comfortable with publishing something that others will see. So helping them understand that they do have the responsibility to be contributing well-researched, evidence-based information. So this kind of faculty-library collaboration that Heather and I have, it's more than just working together. I love working with Heather. We have a great time. I think her students see that, but it's helping students in a science class understand the benefit of going to the library and using peer-reviewed research, and understanding how to navigate the library catalog, and how to cite things properly. So just to kind of elaborate on this a little bit more, faculty, like our students, need support. And Heather and I had this really great conversation a few years ago about I think we were writing the proposal for our chapter, but we were really looking at how our relationship, she and her, how it's evolved over the years, and how as an adjunct, she didn't really have any connections to the library, and now she does, right? And that's not just beneficial for her, that affects all of her students that she now has going forward, right? She feels comfortable enough to refer them to me or to someone else in the library, where that may not have happened before. Also, the next thing, so she and I are still figuring it out. We've been doing this for at least 5 semesters now, and every semester without fail, at the end, we're like, man, we didn't do that part right. We need to change X, Y, and Z, because we are always still learning. But without this collaboration, we have two completely different brains. We look at things from different lenses. She's a faculty member, I'm a librarian. So that collaboration really has allowed us to kind of really look at things more holistically, which ultimately benefits our students. And I kind of already mentioned the last point, but I see those students so much more now than I probably ever would have if Heather and I hadn't been collaborating.
Sorry, my unmute button didn't want to work. Yes, I mean, Lindsey kind of captured it perfectly there. There's so much. Unfortunately, with COVID, that kind of, the the face-to-face interactions that we had with Lindsey on a regular basis were definitely suppressed, and hopefully maybe this semester we can figure out how to bump it back up. But as you can see, like, we have this beautiful space, and you could see it on a previous slide. We have this beautiful space in our library where we have these massive TV screens, and the students can actually work off of them. They're touch screens, so they can move things around. And on the final day, their assessment is actually these public presentations. So I actually, I'm going to do a little sidebar quick. I actually practice what's known as ungrading. So my students don't actually get grades on individual pieces of their work. And their public presentations here are part of something that I call authentic assessment. So like a poster session where you would walk around and talk to people talking about their posters, my students share their websites with their classmates and also invited members of the university community. And we also do invite previous cohorts. I think I've only had one or two students from previous years show up to see what the websites look like, but I always do invite them so that they can see that. But this is a space for them to tell everyone what they've learned, to share, and it never fails. Somewhere, somehow in that, 80-minute time period, somebody goes, I'm talking to every student in these groups, and all of these projects are really connected to each other. And it's like, yes, you get it. It's like this big light bulb moment that, like, even though you are all on different topics, each one of these things could eventually tie in to talk about another topic. And that's kind of the goal of the course, is that, yeah, there's individual topics in science, but they're all kind of relevant and they're all kind of important and they all kind of tie together. And so if you can kind of see that, you'll walk out of the class with a much more open mind towards science. And so I think I'm going to end here with a couple of student testimonials. What is missing here is this past semester, I actually had a lot more students start to comment on using the websites as textbooks, because these websites are the main resource that I give my students in the weeks that we talk about these topics. So the first topic we talk about every semester is space exploration. And so I give them the link to the space exploration website and say, explore this, read this, find what's interesting to you, and let's come back to class and talk about it. And this past semester, I had probably 5 times as many comments about that, because the websites are starting to become so detailed, so involved, that they really are starting to work as a really great resource for my students. And with that, the link is there, but I think Moriana put it into the chat. Our email addresses are here, and we are both pretty active on Twitter as well. So I'm going to leave that up for a couple of minutes. Daniel said, I know some classes have used editing Wikipedia articles this way. Was it ever considered? I've considered doing that in the past. I opted not to do Wikipedia articles. I've read some interesting things about editing Wikipedia. Simply there's a team of people that think they're the Wikipedia editors, and sometimes when students add articles or add 2 articles, they immediately jump in and say, oh, well, you're not an expert on this, we're just going to delete your information. I wanted this to be completely contained within our website, but still open to other people using it. And it is technically under a CC BY NC SA license. So if somebody wanted to take a website and modify it in any way that they can contact me. But it's, I'm considering switching platforms to Pressbooks, not this semester, not this year. It's just not happening. Mainly because of the ease in transfer to other people using it.
Thank you very much, Heather and Lindsey. I put in the chat, apologies, someone is destroying a tree outside my house. So there is a lot of sound, background sound. So I will keep myself muted as much as possible. I don't know if anybody else has a question for Heather, Lindsey, or Anna and Daniel. Now we are open for all questions. You can unmute yourself and ask or add the questions to the chat. Just please let us know. I have a question for Lindsey. I'm interested in the idea of applying fair use for a public website. Mm-hmm. So how do you manage that? Like justifying, in a sense, the use of some copyrighted resource on a public website through fair use?
Yeah, so I had a really good conversation with Meredith Jacob at Creative Commons about this a few years ago, because I always, in the beginning when we started this project, we would kind of shy away from having students use any third-party material just because it was scary. And then I talked to Meredith, and she had a really good suggestion and said, if whatever content the student is writing about, say it was a specific river in Rhode Island, which I don't even think there are rivers in Rhode Island, but whatever. And the image they wanted to use to, to have associated with the content, because it would demonstrate what they were writing about, visually demonstrate, that would be considered, you would be able to make a fair use argument for that, versus if they just found a really pretty picture of a river on Google that was copyrighted and they put it in there, right? There's no connection there. There's no, it's not a critique really, you know what I mean? So it's more like if you can make a connection, a very clear connection of why you need that content in there and why it's important to helping your audience understand the point you're trying to make, then the fair use is more valid. But of course, we will never know if something is considered fair use unless it goes to litigation. So
I do have an example from this past semester.
Oh, great.
Let me share my screen again. I had a student who decided to write about pink pineapples. Oh, my chat box just got huge. Sorry. Write about pink pineapples, but pink pineapples are super brand new. Like just came on the market in like September in the United States. So there's not a lot of pictures or, openly licensed pictures. So we had a student down here, the pink pineapple image. This image was used under fair use due to how new the pink pineapple is due to a society. So like, probably not the best way of writing it. We need to work on that a little bit, but we do have students claim fair use but like this is a perfect example. You can't talk about the pink pineapple without showing a picture of a pink pineapple, in my opinion. I don't know about anybody else. But to me, it was really important that we got a picture of a pink pineapple, but there were no pictures out there for us to use, so we claimed fair use. We've also claimed fair use on logos like NASA and EPA and stuff like that. I mean, those are my students write about what work they do for climate change, but the logos are copyrighted. The copyright is held by the United States government. You can't technically use it without permission, but we do claim a fair use argument for it.
Thank you very much. That was a very, very good explanation. I mean, with examples, I tend to be very conservative in that area. I will try to be more bold, let's say, and claim fair use a bit more with my students. Thank you very much for that information.
Yeah, we were really conservative to begin with, like Lindsey said, but it got to the point where like we were just getting pictures of like on the DNA page, it was all DNA. It was just like random designs of DNA, and it wasn't really helping us. So we decided to start broadening it to make it a little bit more useful than your stock images. If you go to the vaccines website, it's full of children getting shots, openly licensed images of children getting shots. Every page has one. And it gets a little redundant over time. So we just tried to broaden our horizons a little bit.
Well, I would like to say thank you to all our authors for sharing their experience, share their chapters. You have access in the chat, you can download, you have access to the book, to their chapters and their slides presentations. We will share with you a video. I'm gonna share my last slide then, where we have the information and the links again to the book and to the author series. We have one more presentation, two more presentations coming. The next one is Library as Key Partner in Open Pedagogy. I hope you join us on January the 26th. Okay, so thank you all. We are coming on 2 hours, so we really appreciate you attending our series and learning with our authors. Thank you very much to all of you.